This is page 32 of the Borderline Manual. We finally got started on filming again. This has been extremely long to do for the mere fact that when I did page 31, I'm trying to do this in order. I was going to do this kind of spread out, but it's chapter 1. So chapter 1 begins on page 30. There's another page 31, which is something I'll talk about later. So I want to try to do each page. The editing has been very difficult because of the spaces in between, cutting them out. It was a learning curve for the software. I use OpenShot, then it would freeze, and I would just do a bit every day, and it took quite a long time to do. The thing is to be able to not say all the time and to plan the before editing, the filming better, so there's less editing to do. So I'm going to read in French, you're not going to hear it, I'm just going to do the English translation. So if you don't know what this page is, go to page 30, listen to it. That's talking about psychosis and neurosis. It's a continuation from that. With time, Kraepelin, who is the German psychiatrist, along with other psychiatrists and psychoanalysts, realized that there were patients where the problems and the evolution of their problems were such that they couldn't class them in the category of psychosis or neurosis. Freud and his collaborators described a whole series of personalities: depressive, obsessive, hysterical, introverted, extroverted, etc. A personality is determined by the habitual manner in which you behave, you react, you communicate in different situations, especially under stress and conflict. Some psychoanalysts have observed that certain patients presented initially emotional problems like anxiety or depression, who seemed to be really anchored in reality, and then they started their psychoanalysis. They had to stop their therapy abruptly. In fact, after a certain time, the more the patient got attached to the psychoanalyst, the more it became strong, which we call transfer. The patient showed out of the ordinary reactions, like mood changes, example, a very strong display of love, then right away a strong display of hate, both in the same session. Also, very strong thoughts, disorganization, and then they became outright psychotic. So you have a person who's usually calm and respectful suddenly displayed these out of the blue reactions which were completely out of proportion with the events that happened. So from there, they weren't able to listen to any reasoning, and sometimes this patient had to be hospitalized. The sudden interruption of therapy was very traumatizing for both the patient and the psychoanalyst. So here's an example. Wasn't enough to help slamming the cabinet door. So for several months, Astrid was seeing her psychoanalyst 4 times a week. Laid out on her couch, she would talk about her childhood and all the molestation that she suffered due to her great uncle. Slowly but surely, Astrid was attaching more and more to her psychoanalyst, who became more and more essential to her, like her mother or father. She doesn't know why, but for whatever reason, it's certain that her psychoanalyst is extremely important to her, maybe too important to her. One day, when her psychoanalyst mentioned that she'd be off on vacation, Astrid went into a hissy fit pretty much. She insulted the therapist, shooting the couch pillow across the room, and then left, slamming the door. So that example is one of the reasons why borderlines had the reputation of being difficult and hard to treat. It would have been easier to say that classic psychoanalysis and pharmacotherapy wasn't enough to help them, but easier to blame the victim than the actual help, I guess. I don't actually have a direct translation. So the next section, pseudo-neurotic or perverted. Another consequence of these dramatic clinical evolutions, certain patients having known a delirious or a manic episode on the couch of psychoanalysts were slowly, a little bit at a time, declared to be non-neurotic, but they were reclassified as pseudo-neurotic or neurotic, or even later they were called perverted. But the choice of a term implies a certain form of moral judgment on the actual human distress that we want to define. So when we understand how much naming someone can influence the way that they perceive themselves, and how society perceives them, and how their peers treat them. It is clear that this way of designating borderline patients helped develop feelings of shame and hatred of themselves that they already have. So this was page 32, now on to page 33. Helped develop feelings of shame and hatred of themselves that they already have. So this was page 32, now on to page 33.